So, the passage we're looking at today is John chapter 6, verses 60 to 71, so to the end of the chapter. Now, this is a passage about people turning away from Jesus, not following him anymore. So, it can be quite a difficult passage to read because, I know people, friends, family who have walked away from God. We read stories of prominent Christians, leaders who also turn their back on God. And that's always very sad. But we shouldn't be surprised because, we read in this passage that it even happened to Jesus when he was teaching. Because, sometimes the gospel is not always easy to hear. It can be challenging. It's not always acceptable to people. Some people find it offensive, which is what Jesus said here. He said, does this teaching offend you? But Jesus was not prepared to alter and water down the message, was he? Because in this passage we see earlier on in John 6 the people following him, but he recognises that they were following him because he had fed them. And so he brings some teaching that challenges them, and so some decide not to follow him anymore. And it can be so easy, and we sometimes do this. We can make the gospel all about just meeting our earthly needs. Maybe not giving people bread as much, but we may talk about things like peace and purpose and prosperity, and that's what it becomes all about. But the problem is that when life gets hard and tough, and it can seem that suddenly this isn't working anymore, it's all too easy to then just walk away from that teaching and decide to look for some other teaching that could provide those things for us. Now, that's not why everybody falls away from God, but it certainly is why some do. But Jesus doesn't alter his message, and what he does here, and the message that they find so hard, is Jesus points them to him. Do you notice that? They say, who can accept this teaching? This is a hard teaching. But he points them to him. And when he says, don't work for this earthly food only, work for spiritual food. And they say, well, how do we do this work? And Jesus says, the work of God is this, to believe in the one who he has sent. Jesus, obviously. But that was a challenge. And then he goes on to say, I am the bread of life. This is one of Jesus' I am statements that you see a lot of in John's Gospel. I am the bread of life, that he'd come from God, he has seen the Father. He was laying claim to say, I'm the Messiah. I am God. This was a hard teaching, and many of them couldn't accept it. And the disciples deserted him because of this teaching. This teaching that put them off. But when the 12 were asked, well, what about you? Are you going off as well? Are you going to leave me too? How did they respond? Well, Peter said, well, to whom can we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe that you are the Holy One of God. You see, Peter understood that the gospel is about Jesus. You see, it's not about meeting our earthly needs, although God does promise to meet our needs and we can look to him for those things. But that's not primarily what the gospel is about. It's about Jesus. He didn't just come to be another teacher to bring another teaching about the way, the truth and the life. He came to be the way, the truth and the life, so that we come to the Father through him, not just through his teaching. And some of that is a mystery. And so, if I'm only interested in earthly food, just a better life in the here and now, then I could at some point get disappointed if things don't appear to be working, if life's getting hard, if I don't feel peace, if I don't feel like life is working out, I could decide to follow some other teaching. But if, like Peter, I know who Jesus is, if, like Peter, I recognise that he is the Holy One of God, that with him are the words of eternal life, then if I trust in him and continue to follow him, then I can eat of the bread of life, the bread that sustains eternally, because it is spiritual bread, and it's that bread that brings us eternal life. And that's the gospel, is that we eat the bread of life.